The House Judiciary Committee hearing room was filled with quiet anticipation as Representative Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone. The freshman Democrat from Texas, recognized for her sharp questioning and legal expertise, sat composed in a royal blue blazer. Across the dais, Republican Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, maintaining his trademark stern look as he concluded his 5-minute statement. A former law enforcement officer, Higgins had once again delivered a strong defense of qualified immunity for police. As someone who wore the badge and risked my life daily, he said firmly, I can tell you officers need these protections to perform their duties effectively. The committee chairman nodded. The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Crockett began, her tone calm and deliberate. As a former civil rights attorney, her focus fixed on Higgins. I've listened closely to my colleague's passionate defense of qualified immunity based on his law enforcement background. Higgins gave a small nod, expecting the usual partisan exchange typical of committee hearings. Before addressing the policy itself, Crockett continued, I think it's important that we fully understand what kind of law enforcement experience informs my colleague's perspective. She lifted a folder embossed with the official seal of Louisiana. I have here the complete employment records of Representative Higgins from his time with the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office. Higgins' confident expression tightened slightly. Mr. Chairman, Crockett said, handing the documents to a committee aide, I'd like to submit these for the record. These official documents tell a very different story from the one my colleague has shared with the public. The room grew tense as Higgins leaned forward, his relaxed posture replaced by focus. Other members exchanged glances, sensing the moment's significance. Representative Higgins often refers to his law enforcement career as the basis for his authority on policing, Crockett stated, her voice gaining firmness. However, these records show that he resigned from the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office while under investigation for excessive force and false statements in official reports. His personnel file contains 6 disciplinary actions, including Point of order, Mr. Chairman, Higgins interjected sharply, face flushed. This is a personal attack unrelated to the topic before us. The chairman shifted uncomfortably. The gentlewoman should confine her remarks to the policy issue. Mr. Chairman, Crockett replied respectfully, when a member uses personal experience as evidence for a policy position, the accuracy of that experience becomes relevant. She turned back to Higgins. In the next 45 seconds, I will present evidence that directly challenges my colleague's claim of expertise. The public deserves to know the truth about those shaping policies that affect millions. What followed in those 45 seconds would reverberate throughout Congress and reshape the national debate on policing reform. Before revealing the evidence that Congresswoman Crockett presented next, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more in-depth political analyses, exposing Washington's most powerful figures. Crockett hadn't come to Congress to maintain the status quo. Elected in 2022 to represent Texas's 30th district, the former civil rights lawyer quickly gained recognition for her diligence and reliance on facts rather than rhetoric. Unlike many new members who spent their first term learning the ropes, Crockett immediately applied her legal skills on the Judiciary Committee. She treats hearings like courtrooms, noted her former law partner in a Texas Tribune profile. She does her research, builds her case, and delivers it with precision, no matter who's across the table. This approach earned her respect within Democratic leadership, but also drew criticism from conservative media, who labeled her as overly aggressive. Her viral response during a CNN interview summarized her stance. When men prepare thoroughly and ask tough questions, they're called effective. When I do it, I'm called aggressive. I'll keep being aggressive for the people who elected me to uncover the truth. Across from her sat Clay Higgins, a Republican representing Louisiana's 3rd District since 2017. Before politics, he gained national attention as the Cajun John Wayne, a hard-talking sheriff's deputy known for viral Crime Stoppers videos warning criminals to surrender. His law enforcement background became central to his political brand. I'm not a politician who learned about policing from books, Higgins often said. I lived it. I wore the badge. I know what officers need to do their jobs safely. That narrative made him a key Republican voice on law enforcement policy. When policing debates arose, leadership frequently positioned him as their expert, and few questioned his credentials, until now. The truth about Higgins's actual law enforcement record, long mentioned only briefly in local Louisiana reports, had never been fully examined on a national stage. This confrontation's stakes extended well beyond individual reputations. The Judiciary Committee was debating the Justice in Policing Act, a bill proposing major changes to qualified immunity for officers. Supporters argued it would strengthen accountability for misconduct. Opponents claimed it would hinder effective policing and put officers at risk. Higgins, drawing on his personal experiences, was among the bill's strongest critics. His emotional appeals, describing moments of life-or-death decision-making, had proven persuasive with moderates. But as Crockett's evidence came forward, it threatened to shift the conversation from emotion to credibility, forcing lawmakers and the public to reconsider who should define the limits of police accountability. This discussion isn't solely about Higgins or Crockett, observed political analyst David Axelrod on CNN that morning, unaware of what would unfold later that day. It reflects a deeper debate about how the nation balances police authority with accountability, an issue that has divided Americans for decades. For Representative Clay Higgins, the personal stakes were high. His political career was closely linked to his law enforcement background, and any credible challenge to that record threatened not just his stance on this legislation, but the core of his public image. For Representative Jasmine Crockett, the risks were equally serious. Questioning a colleague's professional record was often viewed as crossing a line in congressional decorum. If her evidence failed to meet expectations, she risked being criticized for personal attacks rather than substantive debate. The atmosphere in the committee room reflected those tensions. Republican members sat closely around Higgins, occasionally whispering advice. Democratic members watched intently, some appearing uneasy about Crockett's direct approach. In the press gallery, reporters leaned forward, sensing something significant was developing. What was expected to be a routine hearing filled with partisan talking points had suddenly shifted into uncharted and politically sensitive territory. The committee chairman, a senior Republican known for prioritizing decorum, looked uneasy as events unfolded. "I'd remind all members that personal remarks are not appropriate for this committee," he said, though his tone carried little authority. As Crockett prepared to present her findings, everyone in the room understood the gravity of the moment. A freshman congresswoman was about to directly challenge the professional credibility of a senior colleague, an act that could either backfire publicly or become a defining moment in the national debate on policing and accountability. Higgins straightened his tie and leaned toward his microphone. "Mr. Chairman, I've always been transparent about my law enforcement record, and I stand by it. The gentlewoman's remarks are both inappropriate and unrelated to the policy issue before us." Crockett nodded slightly. "With respect, Representative Higgins, you've made your law enforcement record central to your argument against this bill. Let's review that record in detail." She turned to the committee. "I draw your attention to Exhibit A," Crockett said as images appeared on monitors around the room. "This is Representative Higgins' official separation record from the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office, dated March 12, 2007. The displayed document showed a resignation form with the box marked "Under Internal Investigation" in the section for reason of separation. Several committee members leaned forward, examining the letterhead and official signatures. "This record contradicts the narrative Representative Higgins has shared with this committee and the American public," Crockett continued. "Rather than leaving on his own terms as a decorated officer, the documents show he resigned while under active investigation for violations of department policy." Higgins shifted in his chair, quietly conferring with a staff member. Some Republican colleagues looked puzzled, clearly unprepared for the turn the hearing had taken. "But the focus here," Crockett added, "is on the nature of that investigation." She switched the display. Exhibit B is the internal affairs complaint that initiated the inquiry. It describes an incident in which Officer Higgins allegedly used excessive force during an arrest, striking a handcuffed suspect multiple times and omitting those actions from his official report. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Democratic members exchanged glances, while several Republicans gathered in whispered discussion. "Point of order, Mr. Chairman," interjected the ranking Republican member. "These allegations were never proven. Bringing up unverified claims from years ago serves only to question our colleague's character, not the policy issue we're meant to address." Crockett remained calm. "Mr. Chairman, I'm not presenting allegations. These are official departmental records, and I'm not finished." The chairman, visibly uneasy, nodded slightly. "Please continue, but keep your remarks focused on material relevant to the legislation." "Thank you," Crockett replied. "Exhibit C directly relates to the question of qualified immunity before us." She displayed another document. "This is a sworn statement from Sheriff Bobby Guidrose, Representative Higgins's former superior, confirming that Higgins was offered the option to resign rather than face formal disciplinary proceedings. The sheriff specifically noted this was not his first violation of use of force policy." Higgins spoke again, his tone tight but controlled. "Mr. Chairman, these selective documents paint a misleading picture. My law enforcement career spanned multiple years and departments. I served honorably and received numerous commendations." "That's partly true," Crockett responded evenly. "Which brings me to Exhibit D." The screen displayed a timeline outlining Representative Higgins's law enforcement career across several departments. Crockett began. Representative Higgins did, in fact, serve in multiple agencies over a 14-year period. What's notable, however, is that he left 3 different departments under similar circumstances, resignations while under internal review. She pointed to specific entries on the timeline. Port Bar Police Department, 2004. Opelousas City Police, 2006. St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office, 2007. Each separation followed incidents involving allegations of excessive force or violations of department policy. The room fell into a heavy silence. Even Higgins's strongest allies appeared taken aback by the pattern, which sharply contrasted with the image he had promoted since entering Congress. At that moment, an unexpected intervention came from Representative Jim Jordan, one of Higgins's key allies. "Mr. Chairman, this character attack has gone on long enough. Can we please return to discussing the legislation itself?" Before the chairman could respond, Crockett addressed the point directly. "I understand Representative Jordan's objection," she said calmly. "But qualified immunity exists specifically to shield officers from accountability in cases of misconduct. When someone with Representative Higgins' record presents himself as an expert defending the permanence of those protections, the American people deserve to understand the context behind that expertise." Jordan looked momentarily at a loss for words as Crockett continued her presentation. "Furthermore," she said, "Exhibit E shows something even more relevant to our discussion." The screen shifted to show official departmental commendation records. "Representative Higgins often refers to his awards and commendations to validate his expertise," Crockett explained. "But these official records show he received only 2 minor commendations during his entire law enforcement career, both within his first year of service." Higgins's expression had darkened noticeably. His earlier composure was gone as he whispered urgently to his aides, avoiding eye contact with fellow members. "I have just 45 seconds remaining," Crockett announced, "and I intend to use them to present the most relevant evidence of all." The room grew completely still as she prepared to reveal her final exhibit, one that would shift this confrontation from challenging to potentially devastating for Higgins's credibility on the very issue that defined his political identity. "Exhibit F," Crockett stated, "is perhaps the most significant in the context of our debate on qualified immunity." The screen displayed an official civil court filing. "This," Crockett continued, "is a federal civil rights lawsuit filed against Officer Higgins in 2006, alleging excessive force that resulted in the hospitalization of a handcuffed suspect. The document appeared on screens throughout the hearing room, complete with visible court stamps and case numbers. Committee members leaned forward, some adjusting their glasses to read the fine print. "The reason this case is particularly relevant," Crockett said evenly, "is that Officer Higgins' defense relied entirely on qualified immunity. His attorneys did not dispute the accuracy of the allegations. Instead, they argued that even if the claims were true, he was shielded from civil liability under that doctrine. She advanced to the next page. The court ultimately agreed, dismissing the case despite acknowledging that, if proven, the alleged conduct would amount to a clear violation of constitutional rights. The judge specifically noted that qualified immunity required dismissal, despite serious concerns about the officer's actions. Crockett then turned directly toward Higgins. So when Representative Higgins insists that qualified immunity is essential for officers to perform their duties, what he fails to mention is that this very protection personally shielded him from accountability for conduct a federal judge found deeply troubling. Higgins stared straight ahead, his expression caught between anger and disbelief. Crockett continued, displaying one final document. Most importantly, she said, after this lawsuit was dismissed, then Officer Higgins was recorded during a department meeting stating, and I quote directly from the transcript, "Qualified immunity is a get-out-of-jail-free card. Without it, half the guys in this department would be bankrupt from lawsuits." A quiet gasp moved through the committee room as the gravity of her words settled in. The statement from Higgins himself directly contradicted his long-standing claim that qualified immunity existed to ensure officer safety rather than evade responsibility. "I yield my remaining 7 seconds to the chair," Crockett concluded, closing her folder with the calm precision of a prosecutor who had just completed a watertight argument. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Higgins sat motionless, his earlier confidence gone. Even his Republican colleagues, who moments earlier seemed ready to defend him, now stared at their notes or phones, avoiding his gaze. After several tense seconds, the chairman cleared his throat. "We'll take a short recess before continuing with questions," he announced, likely hoping to give Higgins a moment to regroup. As members began to rise, Higgins leaned toward his microphone. "Mr. Chairman, I request time to address these misleading portrayals of my record." "The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes," the chairman replied. Higgins adjusted his tie, clearly struggling to maintain composure. "What Representative Crockett presented is a selective and incomplete version of my long service in law enforcement," he said. "Some of those documents are missing important context, and a few are just incorrect." His broad denial, however, avoided any specific detail, and members on both sides of the aisle noted how weak the response sounded. Crockett quickly asked for additional time. "Mr. Chairman, since my colleague has questioned the accuracy of these records, I'd like to state for the record that every exhibit I introduced comes directly from verified department files or court documents, each authenticated by the proper authorities." Holding up a notarized certification, she continued, "This is a confirmation from the current St. Landry Parish Sheriff, verifying that these are exact copies of official records. I can provide similar verification for the court filings and other documents." Her calm and methodical authentication, clearly prepared in advance, left Higgins with nothing further to contest. His expression shifted from defiance to quiet resignation as the chairman resumed the regular questioning. The first question came from a Republican member who had long supported Higgins on police issues. Yet instead of a friendly prompt, his tone revealed the immediate damage done to Higgins's credibility. "Representative Higgins," he began carefully, "based on the documents presented, did you resign from multiple departments while under internal investigation? And did you personally benefit from qualified immunity protections in a civil lawsuit?" The fact that this came not from an opponent, but from within his own party, confirmed how much Crockett's presentation had shifted the room. In less than a minute of evidence-based questioning, she had undermined the credibility Higgins had built his entire career upon. Within minutes of adjournment, clips of Crockett's systematic presentation were trending across social media. Crockett receipts and Higgins exposed dominated national conversations. News alerts flooded devices across Washington as major outlets interrupted broadcasts. "One of the most devastating congressional exchanges in recent history," commented CNN's Jake Tapper. Former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti told MSNBC, "This wasn't political theater. Crockett presented verifiable evidence that directly contradicted Congressman Higgins' narrative about his career. The implications for qualified immunity reform are significant. Outside the chamber, reporters swarmed lawmakers for comments. While reactions split along party lines, the divide wasn't absolute. Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez praised Crockett's performance. What she did today was a masterclass in oversight. She didn't make accusations. She brought receipts. This is how Congress should function. Republican responses revealed internal fractures. Some dismissed the evidence as selective, while moderates expressed concern. Representative Nancy Mace stated, "We need to review these records carefully. If verified, they raise serious questions about who we rely on as experts in policing policy." By evening, the political fallout had intensified. After an urgent meeting with party leadership, Higgins released a written statement. During today's hearing, certain selective documents were presented that give an incomplete view of my law enforcement career. I continue to believe my experience provides valuable perspective on policing matters, though I regret if any past statements or actions appear inconsistent with my current position. The cautiously worded response only deepened scrutiny. Local Louisiana media, where Higgins had first earned fame as the Cajun John Wayne, began revisiting his police record. Local outlets have questioned Higgins' narrative since 2017, CNN's Brian Stelter observed. It's remarkable how long he maintained that image until today. Overnight polling showed a sharp shift in public sentiment. Support for reforming qualified immunity rose 12 points, with 64% of respondents saying they found Crockett's evidence convincing. Among Republicans, support for some level of reform jumped from 23% to 41%. For Higgins, the political consequences were swift. By the next morning, House leadership had removed him from the list of scheduled speakers for the Justice and Policing Act. His name also disappeared from official GOP talking points. 3 days later, he announced he was stepping back from the qualified immunity debate, saying, "To keep the focus on policy rather than personality, I believe it's best that I recuse myself from further deliberations." Insiders later confirmed that the decision wasn't voluntary. Leadership had pressured him to withdraw due to concerns he'd become a liability. Meanwhile, Crockett's national profile soared. Her evidence-driven approach earned bipartisan respect from government accountability groups. Harvard law professor Noah Feldman wrote, "Crockett demonstrated exactly how congressional oversight should operate, through documented facts, not speculation or rhetoric." Even moderate Republicans began signaling a willingness to compromise. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus proposed a middle-ground version of qualified immunity reform, balancing officer protections with accountability measures. 2 weeks later, the Judiciary Committee approved an updated Justice and Policing Act, incorporating meaningful reforms while retaining limited immunity. The bill passed with bipartisan support, 14 Republicans joining Democrats. Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler credited Crockett's presentation for transforming the discussion. She shifted the debate from politics to policy. Higgins, though remaining in Congress, gradually faded from law enforcement debates, focusing instead on infrastructure and energy, topics unrelated to his past record. 6 months later, the Washington Post published an in-depth investigation, verifying all of Crockett's exhibits and uncovering even more inconsistencies in Higgins's background. The report revealed 2 additional departments from which he had quietly resigned, and 7 previously unreported civilian complaints shielded by qualified immunity. Crockett's rise from freshman representative to national figure was complete. Her legal training had helped her spot the gap between Higgins' words and record, but her disciplined presentation proved her real strength. "Sometimes the most effective argument isn't rhetoric, it's evidence," she told 60 Minutes. "When leaders use personal stories to shape law, those stories must hold up to facts." Her success reshaped how congressional oversight was viewed. Staffers on Capitol Hill began calling it the Crockett method: research, documents, and straightforward presentation over drama or partisanship. As one political analyst noted, what made Crockett's moment so powerful wasn't the accusation, but the proof. It was policy-focused, not personal, and that's why even her opponents couldn't dismiss it. A year later, with qualified immunity reforms enacted federally and debated in multiple states, Those 45 seconds of evidence continued to influence American politics. Higgins remained in Congress, but was no longer the face of policing policy. His reputation, once built on myth, had been permanently redefined by fact. The Higgins-Crockett exchange will be remembered, concluded The Atlantic, not because it ended his career, but because it reminded us that in a democracy, authority must be grounded in truth. When it's not, even the strongest narratives can collapse in under a minute. As reform efforts expand nationwide, we'll continue following this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell for updates on how preparation and evidence, not politics, are reshaping the national conversation on accountability.